So Ben True, welcome to the Beer Mile podcast. Super stoked to have you on, especially coming off of your debut marathon. So maybe that's a good place to start. How are we feeling about New York City? How are you feeling body-wise here a couple weeks after your debut?
Yeah, I mean, there's quite a few questions there, but start with how I'm feeling now. Feeling pretty good now. I'm just starting to get back into like the swing of training. I took 10 days off after the marathon of no running, and then have slowly started building back. And I'm back to yesterday was my first double run. But I'm back to like 70 miles a week now. I'll probably be back to normal training in another week or so. So that would have been a little over 4 weeks of transition back. But the body feels good. I don't know. The marathon's a weird event where I finished and sitting around the hotel later that day, sitting on the couch. I would not have thought I ran a marathon. The nervous system didn't have that same fatigue that like a 5K on the track does. I was still like mentally clear, and like energy levels were still pretty high. But as soon as I tried to get up from the couch, then my legs would just scream and protest, and it was all that muscle soreness was what was really. And that took me a few days for that to subside. And then I thought after about 4 days that, hey, I feel great. I should go for a run. And I went for a run and all that muscle soreness came immediately back. And I was like, maybe I'll ride like a stationary bike for a little bit if I want to spin the legs out as opposed to running. But it was that almost like going to a gym and like lifting really hard, that muscle fatigue.
Yeah.
But yeah.
It's always so surprising doing the marathon, because obviously in training, you're running big volume, you're also doing runs that are basically marathon distance, close to it, and then to still have that level of fatigue and like musculoskeletal soreness coming out of that, it just seems weird to me that it like is that much of an impact, even when you've been training so hard to adapt to that over the months leading into it.
Yeah, and it's so different than, say, like the 5K on the track, where you have this like deep adrenal fatigue and nervous system fatigue. So like I'd never be able to sleep after a 5K race because my brain would always be racing. And I would have soreness in the legs, but it'd be a different soreness. It'd be like a throbbing soreness at rest. Whereas after the marathon, if I'm sitting down, there was no soreness. It was only when I tried to move that would happen. So completely different beast and how you feel afterwards. Yeah.
I mean, post 5K, 10K, I would like running kind of like your cool down. And then the next couple days after a fast event, I feel like that is much more conducive to recovery than running after a marathon.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, I was just going to say, how did you feel about being the second American, 7th overall, 212? I mean, was that like kind of roughly what you thought you'd be? Did you exceed expectations? Did you miss kind of what you were hoping for? How would you rate the performance?
Yeah. Honestly, I was hoping for a little bit more. And the way that the race played out, it was a complete unknown. And so going into the race, there was no nerves or whatever, because I just didn't know what I was getting myself into. And once you go in those complete unknowns, you don't even know how you should think on the starting line. And I was like, well, here it goes. But the whole time my coach was saying, leading into it, was saying, you have to get through 20 miles feeling relaxed and easy, and that you haven't started racing yet. And then he was like, then you will have a few waves of desires to race. And on the first time you feel like you need to race, you want to push that back and just keep on going. Second time, push that back, keep on going. And only if it comes up the third time and you realize that you're in the last 10K of the race, are you allowed to feel like you're actually racing. And so when we started, the first 10 miles, the difference between 4:55 pace and 5:05 pace feels the same. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, am I going too hard? Am I going too easy? I don't know. And so I think I erred too much on the conservative side. And so I was never in that lead pack. And so once I started racing with, 5 miles to go, I had a lot more to give than, I think they said that the fastest final split between 25 or 35K to the finish from anyone in the field. And it just shows like, I definitely didn't race the whole 26.2 miles. I raced the last bit of the race. And I think that was just because I was a little nervous about the event and just wanted to hold myself back. And so I still don't know how hard you can go for that first 20 miles and still be able to handle the end. But I think I can go a lot faster than I did. And so it would have been nice to be, have that extra 30 seconds banked for the first 20 miles. Yeah. And I've been able to place quite a bit higher. So that's the little thing I was, kicking myself for.
Yeah. I think very, very optimistic outlook. You had, I forget what podcast, but I think you have some really interesting thoughts, or at least I thought you did, on your methodology of like covering moves, how you like evaluate whether or not you should. And to me, it seemed like this very different, I feel like it's covered somewhat poorly during the actual race. It's not talked about, even though this is like for the elite field, something that the entire race is contingent on. Could you talk a little bit around like how you evaluate whether or not you should be covering a move?
Or, for the marathon, I have no idea, right?
Right.
But for shorter distance races, I have a little better idea about that. And I actually never race with a watch on and never look at splits. I'm somebody who likes to run 100% by feel and by competitors. The marathon in New York was the first time I actually raced with a watch and actually was checking splits every now and then, just so that I could hold myself back. Yeah, I don't know. I have every race is different of how I approach it and how the mental energy goes into it. But a lot of times, each race, I will pick a point of the race that says, I have to be with the leaders in the front of the race at this point for me to have a shot at the win. And then another point of, in my head, if I'm with the leaders at this point of the race, I have strong confidence that I will win overall. So like in a 10K, the first goal is be at 8K with the leaders, right? And so, I don't think about 10K of distance. I think about race 8K, make sure I'm in the position I want to be at 8K. And then the real racing takes like the lizard brain in your head, the real racing takes over for those last 2K to get you through the finish line. And I figure that if I'm with the people, then I have a very good shot of getting by them in the last few meters of the race. But like, that's kind of how I think it through. There's always I call them like the angel and the devil on your shoulders. And you have this like internal dialogue, and you always have that thought in your head of like, all right, go now. And I can't really explain where that comes from. It's just like that feeling of, I'm feeling good right now, I should race. Or it's I see a move happening and it's like now or never. And being aware of that, as I was talking about earlier, my coach Ray was like, when that little guy on your shoulder says go in the marathon, you don't listen to him the first few times. Yep. But in shorter distance racing, you have to listen to that right away, and you can't second guess, because as soon as you second guess the little guy on your shoulder, most of those moves have been made, and now you're trying to move up to it. So it's learning how to interpret that and learning how to, I don't know what the best way of describing it is, but not having confidence in that, because that is your subconscious basically being like, all right, I'm assessing my body. I'm okay to go now. And it's usually when you listen to that little guy in your shoulder, most of the time the race plays out very, very well for you. But the times when you second guess that guy on your shoulder, the inner dialogue, a lot of times that's when you finish races and you have all these, what ifs and I should haves and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. I've never really thought about the voice in your head, the subconscious piece of it. But it is interesting, like you're saying, the marathon is such a different beast in that if you get too excited too early, like there's the room for screwing up is so high versus like a 5K or 10K. Like if you get out too hot and you've been putting in the work, like you're going to still hang on to a pretty solid time. Like you can't totally completely destroy your time, but marathon, you can, add up several minutes in the back half if you're really going out way too hard. As someone who's blown up in my fair share of marathons, going for a way faster time than I should be going for, it's very easy to do. So as much as I think it's probably a good play, at least from my perspective. It seems like it's a good place to be, to have finished the debut, have that under your belt, and like knowing that there's more to give versus the reverse of maybe going out way too hard. And maybe it would have worked, but also the reverse being you could have, faded and had a really bad taste in your mouth about the marathon overall going forward. So I guess from two questions from that. One, why was New York the choice for your debut? And then going forward, then what are you thinking about for your next marathon?
So why New York? I mean, there's multiple reasons why New York. But one of the big ones was I wanted to do a world marathon major. And so that, narrowed it down. And then especially for my first marathon, I didn't want a race that was paced, just because I didn't want to have to deal with that. And I just wanted to be a race that was competition only. I like that style of racing a lot more, especially for like the longer distance stuff. And so in reality, that brings it down to New York or Boston. Yeah. And I don't know, New York, with it being rolling up and downs, I thought it would suit me very well, as opposed to Boston, which is like all down, all up, all down, which I also think would do all right with, but like I wanted that rolling for the first one. And I've had a lot of success in New York, and the New York Roadrunners have always treated me very well, and I've always, enjoyed all the races I've done with them. And so it was easy to travel to, and seemed like the right one. I actually wanted to do it last year, and had, all signed up, had a contract with them to race it. And unfortunately wasn't able to race because of COVID. And so because of that, I wanted to make sure, even though that now Boston was also in the fall, and so like it could have been a competitor, I kind of wanted to stick with New York because that was originally my plan all along.
Yep.
So, yeah.
And then, so another marathon coming in 2022, or back to shorter races?
I think so. I think definitely. Who knows if it'll be a spring or a fall?
Okay.
We'll see how I feel when the body, gets back into training, and whether or not I want to do a spring track at all. I think if I do Boston, it'd be very hard for me to come back off of Boston and do any sort of track racing.
Right.
And so it's whether or not I want one more track season, or if I'm going full on to roads and marathons. So that's to be determined.
I think post NYC half, the year that you won, you did an interview and said like no marathon plans, which obviously like it takes a couple of years to get to the point where you're moving up in distance. But what has really been attractive to you about the marathon leading into this season, as well as post New York City performance?
Yeah. I mean, for me growing up, one, I got into running because my dad was trying to qualify for and then qualifying for the 100th running of the Boston Marathon. Yeah. And so the marathon was always seen as like what runners did, right? And if you, that's still like for the general public, if you were to ask what running is, everybody would say marathoning, right? And so like working at a running store in high school and college, you know, people would ask me what a marathon time was. And I'd be like, well, I actually run the mile. I don't do the marathon. They'd be like, well, maybe someday you'll be good enough for a run. You know, like getting that all the time. And then training, just, you know, running long runs and being like, oh, it'd be really fun to try to get out a good marathon. And so, you know, it's always in the back of your head, right? It's always in the back of your head. But I just wanted to make sure that I did what I wanted to do on the shorter distance stuff before going to the marathon too soon. Cause I've seen a lot of people go to the marathon very early and then they lose too much of their leg speed, to be able to come back. Granted, that's not everybody, but a lot of people do that. And so I just was a little scared that my shorter distance racing would suffer if I went to the marathon too early. And so it just kept getting delayed. And I finally was like, well, might as well do one and see how it goes. So that's basically how it was. And I really enjoyed the training for it. The last few years, my body has taken a real beating for the shorter distance racing stuff. I've had a lot of real chronic fatigue. I think it's just adrenal gland fatigue from running so much 5K pace work. And especially doing it solo so that I can't even shut my brain off. I have to like stay very motivated to be able to.
Of the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the body would just be beat up from so much stuff on the track and in spikes. There's up until this, you know, last build up to the marathon, I don't think there was any time longer than maybe a week where I could wake up in the morning and walk down my stairs, because everything would be so sore and tight. I would just be hobbling around. And that all that chronic fatigue and pain kind of starts wearing at you a lot. And so I was kind of getting tired of that shorter distance stuff. And then moving to the marathon, it was unreal how good my body felt. I was running more miles, but everything was slower paced. Mm-hmm. And I could, in the middle of a 130 mile, training week, I could bound up the stairs. I could, wake up in the middle of the night and walk to the bathroom to pee and have no soreness. And it's just like, wow, this, you can actually do this and not be sore all the time and not be in pain all the time. And so I think that's really made me look more towards, well, maybe the body, especially at my age now, likes that longer stuff more. And it definitely, how I feel doing it makes me feel like, I can still do it, as opposed to forcing myself to keep beating your head against the back of the pain locker to do that shorter stuff.
Yeah. Has that changed your thoughts on your own longevity as a professional runner? Do you think it's extended because of how good marathon training feels?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's a combination of that and now having training partners and starting this new club and having Dan Curts and Fred Huxham here. We're looking also to grow that and have more athletes. And that's definitely helped. The burnout was real training solo for as many years as I did. And so trying to, get more people running together and working together, it's definitely re-energized and rejuvenated. And made me think that I can still run for years and there's still things I can do, as opposed to dreading it like I kind of had been doing.
For sure. Shout out Iowa State, Dan Curts, Iowa State grad. We both went to Iowa State as well.
Oh, nice.
Dan, I was just thinking, man, said no one ever. I feel better doing 130 miles a week than less mileage. Who knew that for me to stop being sore, I just had to start running more miles and chill out on the track work a little bit.
Do you think there's any correlation between that and your time as a cross-country skier?
Which part?
Just like the longevity or your body adapting more towards like the high volume workouts.
I don't know about that. I think it helps my longevity because I wasn't a specialized runner for so long in my career until I graduated from college is when I stopped skiing competitively. I think that definitely helped. I think that helped build a stronger aerobic base. And I think it also helped my body handle running later in like having a longer career.
Yeah.
So when I was looking at colleges, it was down to two. It was down to Stanford and down to Dartmouth. And obviously if I went to Stanford, there'd be no skiing. And if I went to Dartmouth, they would allow me to do both. And part of me regrets not going to Stanford only because I know without question that I would have run faster in college, because I didn't run very fast in college. And I would have run faster, I think, in the first 5 years post-collegiately as well, because I probably would have been able to come out with a contract. I would have been able to come out and be in a bigger training group. But I really don't think I would still be running if I took running that seriously in college. And instead going the ski route, I think that's allowed me to keep running now.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you brought up, not joining a group, early on. You spent a lot of your career training solo. Now you have Dan and Fred and building a group there. But talk a little bit, and I know you've talked about this before on other podcasts as well, but the philosophy or the decision to like stick to your roots, stick to home, not join one of these groups, joining a Bowerman or any of these other teams and deciding to kind of go solo. And then, eventually though, getting Dan to come on board and even offering up some money for him to come train with you and get a training partner to come out. So talk through that decision process.
Yeah. I mean, so I'll go back from the very start. When I left college, that was right when Bowerman started. They weren't calling themselves Bowerman, obviously, but that was when Jerry was starting a group. And I tried to go to that group, but he didn't see any value in me. So he said no. And so then I went to Oregon Track Club in Eugene because they were one of the only ones that were looking at me. And Frank Gagliano, who was the old coach for them, basically called me up and said, "You're going to Oregon Track Club in Eugene." It wasn't do you want to, should you? He's like, "No, you're doing this." And so I did. And I thought that type of training environment and that type of group, getting that support, I would be foolish not to do it. And that's where you had to go to run fast. And I realized fairly early on when I was out there that it just wasn't for me. I enjoyed my training partners. I really met a lot of great people, but that environment and that style of training group just wasn't what I wanted, and I ran horribly for them. And so I made a decision that I was going to come back east. I had no other plans, but I wanted to keep running, but I knew that it wasn't going to happen in Eugene. So I decided to just strike it off on my own and come back home. And it just fortune has happened that Tim Bro, who is, a former runner, started a group or was the coach of a new group that was formed in Hanover, New Hampshire. And I was like, well, this is perfect. I'll go do that. And so I joined that, and that was called In the Arena. But In the Arena didn't really materialize the way that the founder of it wanted it to. And so it shut down after a year or 18 months. And so then I was from then on out by myself in Hanover. But I realized that the number one thing is that I need to be happy wherever I am outside of running. And I want to be in an environment, in a place where I enjoy being outside of running. And is the most important thing. It's not to force yourself into a place that you don't actually like, or environment you don't actually like, because people say that you have to be there to run well, that usually leads to resentment and you never being able to reach your potential of being able to put all your energy into it. I'd much rather be in a position where I enjoy living and being, and then it might take a little bit more work for me to train the way I need to, but I'll be happier doing it that way. And if you're happy doing what you're doing, you're going to be able to put more of your passion, more of your energy towards it, and hopefully get better. And so that's the route I decided to go, and had been training here ever since. There was a time when I was able to convince Sam Chalanga to come train with me, which was fabulous for me. We trained very well together. We both ran some good times while we were training together. And then he left for a Nike coach, and then I was on my own again until Dan Curts came around.
Yeah. One thought that came to mind, building on this longevity of, cross country skiing, and you not basically, for lack of a better way of saying it, destroying your legs, using up your legs early on because of the cross country skiing. Do you think that training solo for all the time that you did helped you as well, because you weren't, I guess, racing workouts? Did it help you in that regard? Or are you someone who, even running solo, maybe that forces you to push even harder in workouts? How do you, I guess, training solo all this time? Yeah. How do you handle that?
So there's definitely positives and negatives. And number one positive is, on your easy days, you can go as easy as you want. You can go completely how your body wants you to run. You don't have to run. Usually when you're in a group, there's always going to be somebody that feels good.
Exactly.
That day, right? And so the pace may be faster than what you really should be running for your easy recovery day. And by training by myself, that was never an issue. The other thing is threshold workouts. Threshold workouts are really supposed to be individualized on, it's not really a pace. It's that feeling, is how the best way I describe it. Mm-hmm. And you go and you hit that feeling and you just ride that line. And it's too easy when you're training in a group to, again, have somebody feel good and maybe push that. And so you're not actually running that threshold. You're running slightly above it.
Yep.
And then the recovery time is more. And so you're having if you go too hard there and you're not getting the right stimulus, you're not planning for the same amount of recovery. And so it kind of throws everything off. And so the beauty of that threshold stuff is that you can do a lot of it because it doesn't take a lot of recovery from it, as long as you don't go too hard.
As long as it's actually a threshold run.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's another beauty of running by yourself. The downsides is anytime you're running fast, it's a whole lot easier to run with other people. And anytime you're trying to run pace, and anytime when you're trying to do those like longer grinding, faster stuff. So like K's at race pace, right? Mm-hmm. Like those would be the worst solo, because you would get through 600 and you're tired and then you still have 400 meters to go. Yep. And so that, when you're training with people, makes life so much easier. And also I would always be somebody that could get out the door once a day without issue to run, because I knew like this is my job, this is what I need to do.
Right.
Getting out the door once is always easy. Getting out the door the second time after you're tired, it could be in the wintertime now where it's dark.
Yep.
That was always a hard one. And to just having somebody to meet up for those makes it a lot easier. If I know I'm meeting somebody at 6:00 here, I'll be there.
It's an obligation.
Yeah,
exactly. But if there's no meet point, then maybe I'll do my second run finally on the treadmill at 9 p.m. because I just, kept pushing it back. Right. And so there's that aspect as well. Yeah.
So you've said that you've paid Dan Curts like $20,000 to come train with you and, help him kickstart, his, career and kind of his like continue on the dream of getting into the professional ranks himself, which is really cool. So with that though, I'm really curious, when you were without a sponsor, but after you weren't no longer with Saucony, and then you just recently were signed with ASICS right before the New York City Marathon. I mean, how like financially, how did everything work for, being completely unsponsored, as well as, having someone that you're paying to be a training partner with you? Like how did all that work economically? Sorry to interrupt this exciting program, but quick plug to the couple of sponsors that keep this thing going. Manscaped. Head to manscaped.com, use code BeerMile for 20% off and free worldwide shipping. Get those holiday packages ordered now.
Get your holiday packages for your package.
Exactly. And then our other sponsor, Allworld, ALWRLD.com, the leader in clean sport, sustainable activewear, eco-friendly. Head over to their website and use code BeerMile15, that's all one word, for 15% off everything in the store. And that is also free domestic shipping.
I mean, this is really good reminders, just because I always am so late to buying Christmas presents.
Exactly.
Go buy your people their gifts,
It's so simple. Anyone who's an athlete or anyone who's just a guy being a guy, they're going to benefit from Manscaped and Allworld, our two sponsors, perfect holiday gifts. Make sure you're checking those out. Thanks to the support. And if you want ad-free versions of our podcast, as well as exclusive content, behind the scenes, other giveaways, a bunch of other shenanigans, bunch of other crap.
So much shit.
Head on over to Patreon, patreon.com/beermile, and you can have access to all of that, plus get some free gifts sent from Adam and I, get access to our Discord, all that good stuff by joining us on Patreon. Now, back to Ben Drew. How did all that work economically?
Yeah. So I was lucky in the end of my time with Saucony that I was able to put away some money. Mm-hmm. And so, yes, when Saucony decided not to renew my contract, it then became very difficult because I had zero money coming in and only money going out. But I had budgeted paying him that ahead of time. And so that was fine still for me. But it was not once I lost the Saucony deal, I knew that I would not be able to continue paying him or bringing somebody else on in the future, because that would be not able. But so yeah, for most of 2021, I was been in the red. But luckily, years past, I've been in the black enough that I'm still able to keep the head above water.
For sure. And Saucony has, and I don't know what you're willing and able to share here, but seems like Saucony's been kind of dropping a lot of talented athletes, or I guess not re-signing, call it what you will, but like Molly Seidel switch sponsors, Noah Droddy, you no longer with Saucony. Is that just them not putting marketing dollars budget towards professional athletes like they had in the past, or
are they looking to like refresh or
like what are they looking for? Yeah. Looking for younger talent only, I guess. Like what led to that happening?
I don't really know. I know that there was a new person in charge of sports marketing and dealing with the athletes. And I think they had a different view on, first off, they admitted to us that they weren't sure the actual purpose of professional athletes within Saucony's portfolio. And then later on decided that there was some value to them. But I think they were saying, I mean, let's be honest. It's if you're Saucony is the smallest of the major shoe brands, and they're trying to, at least this is what I was told before I left. So and I have no idea what's going on in the company, right? But before then, they're really trying to push and to grow, and they saw their best way of growing is to move towards the Dick's Sporting Goods and the Kohl's type marketplace. So outside of the run specialty stores,
right?
Because you can sell much higher volume in those stores.
Yep.
And so if that's their strategy, someone like me, does a buyer at Dick's Sporting Goods really know who I am? Probably not, right? They know that I'm a runner, but they could find somebody who's a 220 marathoner, who the Dick's Sporting Goods person, assuming they're not, an avid runner themselves, they're just a hobby jogger or a sports person. They know that a 220 marathon is fast, and they're probably at a level of fastness that is incomprehensible to that person buying from the Dick's Sporting Goods. And so the difference between a 220 marathon and someone like me, or somebody even faster than me in the marathon, they don't really understand that difference, right? They just see fast as fast. And so that 220 marathon is a lot cheaper. And if that 220 marathoner has a great Instagram following, then they probably get a better ROI for, for the money, getting eyeballs on the product. And so it's shifting what sports marketing is. And you can't really fault them for that, because they're looking at metrics. And the old system of sports marketing, the metrics are very fuzzy. It's really hard to say, hey, as a shoe company, I'm giving you X dollars. How many shoes are you directly responsible in having people buy, right? You can't find that. But if you look at somebody's Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, you can see, all right, at least we know that this many people are having eyeballs on the product. And that alone can be valuable, because more people looking at a product, the more people they think about the product. And you can have click-throughs and actually see sales. And so there's metrics on things that weren't previously available. And so anytime you go from, well, this new technology, you can have some metrics. This old technology, you have zero metrics. People are going to focus on the metrics. And so I think you're seeing that in the broader scheme of not just sports marketing, but all marketing, right? The amount of the rise of influencer is huge, because companies can actually see
there's attribution,
and yes. Whether or not getting 10,000 views of a shoe for somebody actually means any of those 10,000 people buy that shoe, right? They still don't know that, but they can be like, at least there's eyeballs on it. And so they can, and so I think that's the situation that all marketing is, especially sports marketing. And Saucony, I think, decided to go that way with their new person in charge. Their new person has since left that position, so I don't know if they're going to change back or what their new strategy will be. But they made a few big shakeups in the meantime.
For sure. Sounds like you just need to get on the TikTok game and the Insta Reel. No, it totally makes sense when you describe it like that. It just seems like such a lost opportunity. I mean, especially Molly Seidel, like absolutely blowing up, and then you're still running. You're fourth at the Olympic trials. You're still running PRs in the 10K. Like, from anyone who's actually into running as a performance standpoint, I mean, especially because Saucony has actually put up some good comparable shoes to Nike's Vaporflies now. So it's like, well, if you want to see the best runners running in those shoes, that to me, coming from the running world lens, of course, would drive more runners to be like, oh, I want to try the Saucony shoe because Molly Seidel just got third in the Olympics in it. I'm going to go for that shoe and give it a go. It seems like that would drive more sales to me. Well, maybe not more sales. It would drive more of that high-end performance type sale versus, like your Kohl's or Dick's, which might move hundreds and hundreds of pairs to as walking shoes or to the hobby jogger, which is a little bit
as opposed to what is it, like Fleet Feet is probably like the largest chain of specialty run stores, right? And I'm sure their shoe sales are a tenth of what Dick's Sporting Goods sells, right? And so you have to
Yeah. One thing I wanted to go back to was, so you mentioned like your legs being sore and like marathon training actually kind of being a good change up from that. But still in 2021, set a PR in the 10K, got fourth at the Olympic trials in the 10K. So it seems like things kind of went really well on all regards there. I mean, obviously probably you would have loved to have gotten third and made the Olympic team. But with that in mind, do you see that like, is that still even a possibility in your mind, in kind of based on how training goes, of these next couple of years, maybe 10K is the race for you? And then, looking ahead, I think ASICS is sponsoring you through 2023. So then I'm assuming 2024 is still on your mind as far as trying to make that Olympic team. And really, I guess, yeah, you got kind of two options, 10K or marathon. So is it over these next couple of years, just kind of seeing where the training goes, seeing how your body responds, and using that to make the ultimate decision for 2024?
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, there's a few pieces of that question that I'd like to pick apart. But yeah, I think the 10K is definitely a possibility. The training leading into when I ran the faster time went great. I had a few injury setbacks that made it so that towing the line at the trials, it was going to be more of I hope I am able to close fast,
okay,
and make the team, as opposed to I was in the same shape I was a few months earlier before injuries. And so I think there is still more I could give on the track as well. I think the bigger question is, do I want to?
Right.
And that'll be the thing. The roads are considerably more fun.
Okay. Yeah.
than the track. Yeah. And there's something so cool and almost romantic about the sense that you have thousands, if not tens of thousands of people towing the same starting line.
Yep.
And trying to go the same course to the same finish line. And you say, ready, set, go. And everybody tries to get to the finish line first.
For sure.
And there's something really cool about that in that community of all those runners, as opposed to the track. You are so separated from the fans and other participants. I mean, even like, a Diamond League 5K has 12 people, right? Mm-hmm. But you don't even watch the other events going on in the Diamond League because you're warming up or you're in the call room or you're, and so you don't have that same feeling and sensation. You're more feeling like you're just a entertainer or like a gladiator that is just trying to do for this very short period of time, entertain the crowd. Whereas the road race has a completely different feel to it. And I really like that road race feel.
For sure.
And so that's another question is, do I even want to go back to the track? And as far as thinking way out to, say, the Olympics, I think the longer I'm in the sport, the less of a desire, or the less of not desire is not the right word. The less that the Olympics appeals to me. Not that I would never
turn down.
Try,
right?
Yeah. But the more it sees, like, growing up, the Olympics is seen as the pinnacle of sport.
Mm-hmm.
But the more you're actually in a sport, any of the sports, you realize that while the Olympics may be the best chance for the world to have eyeballs on you, it is not the pinnacle of the sport, of any sport, right? Every sport out there, their world championships or their different tournaments have more notoriety within the community, and only it's the corporate sponsors that make the Olympics anything worthwhile. And so that's not to say that I would love to be able to run in the Olympics, but the less of that importance is the longer I'm in.
I think that's really obvious especially when it comes to the marathon, because there's much more opportunity to get that world-class caliber, because you're all running. I mean, if you're a pro marathoner, you're probably not dropping down. Most people aren't dropping down to race on the track. Right.
You almost have a marathon every few months with the world marathon majors. You have so many opportunities, and those do attract the eyeballs, like similar. I mean, maybe not quite at the same level of the Olympics, but there's still that same level of notoriety and competition and all of that. And
most of the top marathoners, just like the NBA, not to the same extent, but like to the NBA players, like there's a whole lot more money if you don't go to the Olympics, right? That you can make,
which
and
is
so you
very
actually have to take a pay cut to
Yes. The whole business thing is weird. We've talked about this with several guests where it's like if you make the Olympic team, you can come out the backside with potentially, you know, getting a much better sponsor, a better deal because you made the Olympic team. But the actual like year of the Olympics itself, you're basically not earning any money. You're forgoing the opportunities on the road and track and all of that too. So yeah, it's such a weird dynamic where it's like the Olympics are kind of incentivized long term, I guess more so if you're early in your career. But then the actual Olympics themselves don't pay you anything. It's not like a big payday to make the Olympic team. So it's such a wild thing. And also to your point on the roads too, what's so nice is that every road race is different course, different competition, different layout, where track is, I mean, it's the same thing. It's the same 25 laps around the oval. You get to go to different cool places and race different people, but it is a lot more of the same week in, week out. And for that reason also seems a little bit less exciting to watch week in and week out too, just because it's much of the same thing over and over again. So then it just becomes all about times, which is not as much fun. And I think you've talked about this too, like the competitive nature of it and winning races and all that. That's what's really the fun part of it, not just chasing a clock around the track. And so many people, I guess, worry about that more than they worry about winning races now. It's all times and stacking up compared to everybody else.
Right. And another thing, going back to like, especially in the marathon, compared to like the Olympics, is you can have a marathon where the top 10 world best marathoners are racing. Yeah. You can never have an Olympic Games where the top 10 in the world are on the starting line because the country rules. And so it's also an interesting dynamic where
I feel like the chances of you like the competition being very good and like actually performing well on that day are just as high outside of the Olympics. Definitely. I mean, because certainly, Tokyo is a prime example of like harder conditions. There are plenty of marathons that saw better conditions in the past year.
For sure. One thing we didn't bring up when we were talking about the New York City Marathon too was that you became a father as well. Yeah. Leading into that, so how did that mess with, or help the training cycle? I don't know. How did that play into your lead up to New York City?
Yeah, I definitely changed things a little bit and made things a little more hectic in the house, for sure. But I think overall it's been good. My wife's been a complete rock star through it all. So she very much realized how much importance were leading into New York City. So we have, actually, I'm in it right now, our guest room. And so she actually moved to our guest room with Hawk. And so I would be able to sleep uninterrupted leading into it. But, the middle of the day, it's interesting of like before training, before a child, you run and you just lounge the rest of the day and you can turn your brain off and you can just basically do nothing. Now with a kid, you can't. And you are like constantly doing things throughout the day as well. And so that's been a big transition because I just haven't had the time to just completely like zone out and turn off. Yeah. In the middle of the day that I normally were able to do in between workouts. Instead, you have to kind of stay engaged. So a lot less naps than previous times. Yep.
Assuming more coffee then.
Yeah. But no, it's been nice. It's definitely a change.
Yeah, no, that's exciting. And hey, even just more room for improvement in future marathons too, as hopefully that sleeping gets a little more consistent and maybe you can introduce those naps back in.
Exactly.
Awesome. To close out here, we have some listener questions as well. Some of these are off the wall. Some of them we already answered, so we'll skip those. But what's the deal with eating a whole sleeve of bagels the day of the race? Like how can you take in that many carbs in one sitting? Just a few hours before a race.
Yeah, so that started very early on in my career, and a sleeve as in like 6 bagels,
Six,
right?
yep,
Not like a baker's dozen.
Right,
Bagels,
correct.
Yeah.
It's only 6. It's not that many.
Yeah. And so I always wake up 4 hours before the race for these, typically for morning races. And so I try to be done eating as close to 4 hours before the race as possible, because that's roughly the amount of time it takes to digest the food out of your stomach and into your intestines. And so you won't have that same stomach issues. And I don't know, I just started eating, and I think the idea was it's better to fill your stomach completely than just to, half fill your stomach. And so then if it's half full, then it'd be like sloshing around. But if it's actually like fully full, then you don't have any issue. That's completely not true, but that was a thought process of mine early on. But also I just am somebody that is a heavy carb burner. And so if I don't eat what some call an obscene amount of food before a race, I will feel depowered in the race. I can actually feel that depowering. Yeah. And I'm not someone who likes to drink a lot of sports drinks. And so I really just drink water and coffee in the morning before a race. And so all my caloric needs are basically coming in those bagels. Yeah. And I will say, as I've aged, I do not eat as many bagels. I think the last morning race where I ate a lot of bagels was the 20K championships in September. And I think I had 4.5 bagels. So I was a full bagel less than normal.
How many at NYC then for the marathon? Did you get 6?
So I didn't have any bagels.
No,
that's not true. I think I had 1 bagel, but I had rice and eggs and oatmeal and peanut butter, because they had a whole breakfast spread.
I see.
For us.
Okay. Yep.
So I diversified my diet.
Okay. And then are these bagels normally just plain, or are you putting peanut butter or something on them?
I usually have one with peanut butter, and then the other ones were plain.
Then the rest are just for utility.
Do you still toast them?
No.
Oh, they're cold.
So the goal is to have at least 1.5 done before you start waking up.
Okay.
So they're right next to the bed, the alarm goes off, you just throw one down. Then you start eating the other one, then you get groggy, you wake up, and then you might have the one with the peanut butter that you can actually enjoy, and then the rest are just cramming in there for utilitarian purposes.
You need like a bagel sponsor.
For real. Yeah. I guess would that be a dream sponsor of
that would be pretty good.
There we go. Another question was on your stance around anti-doping, and even going beyond just WADA and thinking I want to do it pure, no whatever extra vitamins
I hope
or any of this other stuff.
Anti-doping.
Well,
for the sport.
of course, yeah. going above and beyond what WADA requires, and saying I don't want to. I guess what's the extent? Are we talking even so no vitamins, no pain relievers like ibuprofen? Where do you draw the line there?
So it's tricky because I am hypocritical in my own speaking, right? Because I'm a huge coffee guy, right? And I understand that there's caffeine in coffee and that it helps performance, right? So I'll get that out of the way at the start.
But also vitamins and vegetables help performance too. So I'm saying. So
yes. Food definitely.
Food helps performance. Right.
Food helps performance. Exactly. Yeah. And so I have no issue, obviously, with people eating, right? You should eat a lot, and you should eat real food, right? Yep. And I'm all for that. Oh, here comes my wife. And I'm all for that. What I start having issues is when people. Is when you look at a product or you look at a fad optimization thing and you're I'm taking this for its performance benefit,
Right.
And you're not looking to say, I did these things in training to allow me to run faster. I did these things in my recovery to allow me to race and train better. But on like leading into a race, I want to take these supplements or these things to race faster. So it's that a lot of it is that mindset. Mm-hmm. And so, for example, like, would I be opposed to somebody eating a lot of beets? No, not at all. But are you taking like hyper processed beets to get the nitrates mm-hmm. and taking those before a race only to make it so that you can, even if it's a placebo and it's like in your head thinking, I'll be able to race 10 seconds faster,
for sure.
right? Which is what the advertising says for it, right? That I think is not crossing the line, obviously, because there's nothing wrong with that. But that's where I personally start having issues of taking that hyper-processed thing solely for the reason of racing faster.
How does this apply to like Normatec boots and that sort of stuff too? Like, do you avoid those things?
No, because I mean, not to the same extent, I don't think, because, for example, different things that you do, stimuluses you do through training, massage, see that as Normatec, all those sort of things. That's things that you are doing as training, as opposed to I'm saying this pill is going to, even though this pill is basically nothing, right? This pill could be like sodium bicarbonate, right? Which is shown to help reduce lactic buildup in the early stages of exercise, right? And so taking that pill or taking that supplement, leading into a race, you're doing it to try to run slightly faster. And you're doing it not through your training or through conditioning your body, but by taking, not a shortcut, but taking a pill to do it, right? And so like that's where I personally start seeing a gray area. Obviously, I understand that we've all agreed to race or to perform by the WADA code. Mm-hmm. So in no way am I saying that people who take sodium bicarbonate are doping, right?
Yep.
I'm just saying that that's when I start seeing things, in my opinion, as I don't want to go to those lines. And so things like a Normatec or these other modalities to help you recover faster, I don't have as much issue with. I do think that most of those are placebo and not actually doing it. And so I don't personally use them, not because I think that they're like cheating, but I don't use them because I don't think my time is best spent doing that. I think there's better things out there for me to do, such as sleeping more. And that I would rather see things for what they are as opposed to what manufacturers are telling me they're doing. There is no secret sauce. The secret sauce is stressing the body, recovering from that stress, making those adaptations, and then doing that time after time after time after time.
For sure.
And so everything else is kind of marketing. And some of those things may feel good, but not all those things actually benefit you. And you never want to be in a situation of like, oh, I didn't Normatec today, and so tomorrow my workout's going to be terrible.
Exactly.
That's clearly not going to be the case. You don't want to have that. And so it's better not to, maybe use that Normatec every now and then because it feels nice, but don't buy into all that hype, see it for what it is.
Don't have your training depend on it.
I always think it's funny when people like, they spend 30 minutes in the Normatec boots, maybe 30 minutes ice bathing, whatever. And then it's like, but did they do strength or do a double run that day? No, they didn't. So it's like that would have made you faster than. Did
they make sure they ate their vegetables?
Exactly.
I mean, those things would help.
It's like, okay, you're trying to get the extra 0.1% when you could have got a 1 or 2% by just doing something else right. So it's fun.
And so like that goes down to, in my opinion, what you're talking about, like vitamins and supplements and stuff. The same theory can go on that as well, right? So I'm not a big believer in taking a multivitamin because, one, most studies have shown that multivitamins don't actually do anything. And Americans have like the most expensive urine out there.
Yeah,
because
you
most
just pee
of
it out.
Shit all out.
it's just peed out. And so I would rather spend my time making sure that I'm eating healthy of real foods and eating vegetables and fruits to make sure I'm getting those vitamins, and put my energy that way, as opposed to putting my energy into buying this particular multivitamin and taking that multivitamin.
Yeah.
So like I see that's where I would put focus on as well.
For sure. Couple closing ones here. Favorite ice cream flavor?
So I am lactose intolerant, so I do not eat ice cream.
Well, there we go. Answers that. Very good.
So I will partake in sorbet every now and then.
Okay. Yeah.
Which I'm a big fan of mango sorbet.
There we go.
I'm not an ice cream guy.
Oh man, good to know.
Or at least ice cream is not a Ben fan or whatever.
Yeah, it's more the reverse. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, and then favorite way to prepare your coffee, like, and or what are like some of your favorite beans or go to? I know you're big into the coffee thing, and maybe you're going to open up that coffee shop once you retire eventually. But in the meantime, how are you? Are we like a Chemex person, French press? Like how are you making your coffee?
So I usually do a pour over is what I like, and it depends on the coffee, but I like I like a Kalita, which is flat bottom brewer, and different coffees that I like. I don't know, they're all over. It's like what are you in the mood for that day? But I like Las Lajas, La Lajas. It's a Costa Rican. They do a very good job with their honey processed and their natural coffees. And it's always very good. This is one farm in Costa Rica. They would always be one that I would look out for. But yeah, it really depends on my mood for the particular day.
My personal coffee question is there like a documentary or series of coffee? Like I need like a YouTube hole to go to of coffee, because my coworkers make fun of me for just chewing like caffeine gum.
Okay.
Hey, you're doping.
I think
get that run gum out of your mouth.
I think that following Ben's logic, I'm going to start drinking more coffee.
But you're not trying to perform necessarily.
Oh, but
anyway, I'm sorry to derail you. Ask your question.
I'm just looking for coffee resources to become more of an adept coffee maker.
Yeah, where do you learn about all your different coffee tips and tricks?
Like YouTube, like the number one coffee personality on YouTube that actually knows what they're talking about is a guy named James Hoffman.
Okay.
And he's British. He's a former world barista champion.
Oh wow!
So
okay.
there is that type of competition out there. Obviously, every niche has their competition. But he's a pretty noteworthy coffee person in the industry, and he has a YouTube channel that dives into all different types of coffee, and it's the way that he explains things is very approachable for both people who are actually into coffee, but people who aren't. And he has an accent, so like makes it a little bit like it's more entertaining.
Of course,
of course.
So he's always one of the ones to look into.
Perfect.
I know what I'm doing this weekend.
There we go. Awesome. Well, we could talk to you all day, but conscious of time here, we'll have to let you go. Hopefully we can schedule a follow-up with you down the line and check in, see how things are going. And excited to see what you choose for your next marathon, track race, whatever you end up doing. So best wishes in your training.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me on too.
Awesome. Thanks.
When are your next competitions?
Oh man, I'm racing the club cross country, USATF club cross country in Tallahassee. A week from Saturday. So that'll be a fun little end to my season, and then probably a spring half marathon for me.
Yeah, I'll go into hibernation, come out with a half, and then hopefully get into one marathon. Later. Yeah. The next marathon, I'm signed up for Chicago Marathon next fall, so that'll be the next big marathon race, and hopefully the Olympic trials qualifying times are actually released by then. So we'll see if they ever.
Don't count on it.
Yeah, seriously, I know, because it's like, all right, that's gonna be my big go at it. Hoping to run fast there. So well, I don't know. Can't bank on anything at this point, but awesome. Thanks, Ben. Really appreciate the time.
Yeah, thank you.